So I suppose we should just get into this Shamima Begum business. So, in short, you probably recognise the name. I don't know anyone who probably doesn't recognise Shamima Begum's name. She first came into the national spotlight, around, I think it was 3 years ago, maybe. I'm not
Yeah, I
sure.
think so.
Yeah, and it's basically because her and two other girls travelled to, I think it was Syria,
Yeah.
to basically join ISIS. And obviously not condoning doing that, but you have to recognize that she was 15 years old at the time. And these people that are in charge of ISIS do obviously use quite manipulative grooming tactics in order to get these um, followers from a young age and convince them to come out there. Nevertheless, she went over there. I think the two girls that she went with have actually died now. I think they've both passed away, which obviously don't condone them joining ISIS, but at the same time, it's sad that anyone's died. But Shamima actually is still alive. And I think it's mad because it's like 2 years ago now, which proves how long COVID's been going on for. I think it was like 2 years ago she wanted to. She basically reached out and said that she wanted to come back. And I can't remember if she said she regrets her decision or not, but she basically said, I want to come back. And I think in response to that, her citizenship was actually taken away from her, which in itself, it's a scary thing. Like, regardless of, even if you are against Shamima Begum, you have to think, like, the idea that someone's citizenship can just be taken away from them, I think it's a mad thing. Like, it's like, I don't understand it, to be honest, because it's like, well, where are you meant to go? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not even saying, yes, you can come back here and we'll incarcerate you, which I'm not saying we should support anyway, but to say that you're literally like, you don't belong here anymore when you've grown up here, your family's here, you don't know any different, you've never been anywhere else, and to say, yeah, your British citizenship has been revoked, I think that's a mad thing. You have any thoughts on that, Simran?
I suppose it's a bit of a complicated one though, because obviously they have revoked citizenship. They've done it, right?
Yeah, they did that a while ago.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
However, what she did was essentially a form of treason.
Mm.
No?
Yeah, no. What she did was wrong. We know that, but before we even get into as to what she actually did and whether there's any not justification, but whether we can like think about forgiving her in that sense, just the idea, even if you commit treason, like, should your citizenship be revoked? You know what I mean? Like, your citizenship is like your identity almost. Like, it's like, so for example, Shamima, she was born here, she's raised
Yeah.
here, she doesn't know any different, and she said, you don't belong here anymore, go somewhere else.
I think on the one hand, it is obviously what you're saying, that it is a bit of like a violation of her rights, I suppose, in a sense, because obviously taking your citizenship away is a big deal since she was born and raised here. However, she made that decision to leave the country and go to Syria and join ISIS. And under that decision kind of comes the consequence of things like that. On one hand, I think when you kind of then look at the radicalization processes and the brainwashing and the kind of the steps building up to her making that decision, then we could probably look at it a bit different, especially considering she was so young as well, and now she wants to come back. She's obviously gone back on her decision. But like you said, I'm not sure if she actually said she regrets her decision. And I think that was a big premise on the grounds of why people were saying that she shouldn't be allowed back in.
Yeah, but this is the thing as well. We think, okay, so she was young when she left, but now she's old and she's not necessarily regretting her decision. So that should act as an argument for us to not take her back. But when you think about it, if someone's left the country at 15 and they've been like in this radical group like for the past 6 years or however long it is, like your you're maturing, and your maturity, it's gonna be stunted. Like, you don't,
For sure.
like for example, like 6 years is a long, that's basically like an entirety of high school pretty much. And whilst obviously it's not great, like, I'm not sure as to what she's said now, like, or whether she takes back a decision, but I know there was one point where she says that, oh, I don't think I did anything wrong.
Yeah.
Again, if you don't know any better, like, come on, like,
What are you gonna say, kind of
yeah,
thing? Like,
and this is the problem as well. It's that the whole tackling of radicalization and grooming in regards to joining extremist groups, it furthers the problem in my opinion. Like, so if you think about it, you've got for example, obviously we talk about Shamima Begum, so for this instance we'll talk about Islamic extremists. Islamophobia is rife throughout the UK. Like, you can't deny that. Like, there are a lot of people who just for no good reason will be racist towards people of the Islamic faith. They will shun them from society. You could argue that there's a bit of a lack of desire to integrate into society, but that's a whole other ball field. But at the same time, there's a lot of unjustified hate towards people of the Islamic faith in the UK. So these people obviously feel like they want to retreat, which further retreat into their communities. And there's this lack of desire, like I said, to integrate with the rest of society. Then you have say one corrupt teacher or one corrupt individual who's linked to these extremist groups, who manages to act as sort of like a parent figure, or someone that actually wants to associate with them. It's someone who like follows the same religion as them, who like thinks the same as them and isn't like shunning them away. So obviously you're going to go towards that, and when you're young as well, you don't necessarily know any better. Then you have the government and their anti-radicalization, anti-extremist measures, which are, to be honest, like very untactful. Like, there's no sense of nuance, there's no sense of trying to actually understand what's going on. It's more of a sense of just putting feelers out and trying to basically trying to find people who are involved in extremist ideologies, rather than actually thinking, okay, so how do we resolve this issue and like try and get the younger generation to not be brainwashed by this.
I would describe that as like the government side of things. It takes a very top-down approach. They don't look at like the whole picture, and they kind of take the approach of, we'll solve the problem once the problem occurs, instead of targeting the problem at its root and finding out ways in which you could change that beginning radicalization process. Where if you kind of got into that, like you said, when people find like vulnerable kids or vulnerable young adults in those situations where, you know, Islamophobia is rife, so it kind of presents to them a feeling of security and like family and belonging. That's how that kind of those extremist views develop. And if the government were to tackle it looking at that side of things, instead of, oh, this problem's already occurred, now let's make a discourse around that, instead of targeting the roots of the problems. Yeah,
let's just basically find anyone who we think is an extremist and lock them up. Because surely after they've been locked up in prison for a certain number of years...
It's already too late as well. They've already done the crime.
Yeah, and also they're going to be locked up in prison for a number of years. Do you really think that after the number of years that they've stuck in prison with no form of like rehabilitation or anything, they're going to come out and be like, I'm cured now.
Yeah, I'm so much better.
I feel like I want to go out into society and not have any extremist thoughts. Like, obviously, that's
if anything, it would just get worse.
Yeah, literally. That's why there's no sense of like rehabilitation, rather than.
That's just a problem with our prison system, though.
Yeah, and also it's the same with like we talked about before about like the difference between forced and arranged marriage. There's a lot of there's a lack of desire to actually understand that there is a difference between forced and arranged marriage from the top down, and because of that, it's basically these programs that are trying to help resolve the problem basically will try and find they're basically just
it's just kind of like, they just kind of dance around the issue, and they don't actually look at the real problems and how you would really go about tackling it. And I think at the forefront of that is just this underlying like attitude of like anti-Asian kind of racism or discrimination and Islamophobia, for sure. They don't want to take the time to acknowledge the nuances and the details of things. They just want to tackle it as a whole, most of the time when it's already way too late anyway. And then you've got your front men, you've got your Rishi Sunak, Preeti Patel, you've got all them, and they make it look like it's all like diverse, and they check the box, but
it's tokenistic. Like, it's totally tokenistic, and it's usually we just go around in circles. And like, going back to the whole Shamima Begum situation, I would ask this, like, do you think that we would be? Oh, do you think that we would be in this situation if Shamima Begum was a young white girl that had been radicalized by ISIS and was now out there and was saying, "I want to come back"?
I think it's very easy to say, no, it wouldn't be the same if it was a young white girl. However, I think in this particular situation with Shamima Begum, because it was ISIS, because at the time everything was very like hot and on the forefront of news and stuff, like it made global news, like the stuff that was going on, like the multiple attacks that were happening in the UK. I think it would be easy to say no, it would be the same if it was a white girl. However, revoking her citizenship is also the reason why they've done it is because she would then pose a threat to like national security. So I think if she really did pose that threat, the citizenship would have been revoked regardless of what colour she was.
I suppose, yeah, there is that argument.
I mean, you could hope. You could hope that's what they would think. That it would kind of stand for anyone of any race. However, I think maybe the job is made easier for them because she's not white.
Yeah. I think like there's also the a lot of people are putting forward the argument that like why should we put our resources towards going and getting her back in this country, which I think is a fair enough argument. But then I'm also like, one thing I don't understand is we've seen those recent interviews where she's been in front of a camera and like has been like, so I don't understand how the people got there. Do you know what I mean? Like if we can get cameras to like perform these interviews, why can't we bring her back? Do you know what I mean? Like I don't understand that.
I think that's just going to be that one stepping stone. They're bringing her back here is going to be that one thing where she's going to get closer to receiving that citizenship, and I think that's what a lot of people don't want.
Right, Halima, welcome.
Sorry guys, it's not my fault. My cousins moved in with us and I had to give her a lift, and she left half an hour later than she said she was.
So, to fill you in, Halima, we're just talking about the Shamima Begum issue at the moment. We've been kind of like going a bit back and forth in terms of like, well, I suppose these are some arguments as to why people are feeling the way that they're feeling, and then also thinking like, but then obviously, should her citizenship have been revoked? So, what are your thoughts on the situation?
In terms of the citizenship being revoked, I mean, like, it's illegal. What the UK have done is they've literally broken international law by revoking her citizenship, and I think it set a very, very dangerous precedent as to in terms of like, for example, so they revoked her citizenship on the basis that she is of Bangladeshi descent, and Bangladesh has a law which says that if your parents or like your grandparents are of Bangladeshi descent, you have access to Bangladeshi citizenship, right? It's not to say that it's automatic or that it's there, it's to say that you have access to it. And they've revoked her citizenship on that basis. So she doesn't have dual citizenship, by the way, guys. So like she is stateless now. She doesn't have citizenship anywhere. This woman is stateless. That in the UN Declaration of Human Rights is they've broken international law by doing that. And also I think it speaks to a very, very dangerous precedent as to people of like colour in this country. We already know that our citizenship is conditional. Like, if a British-born British citizenship can have her citizenship revoked on the basis that she has descent elsewhere, what does it mean of everyone else who has foreign descent?
Yeah, I know what you mean in terms of like setting a precedent for the future. Like, Shamima Begum is a more negative example in that obviously she has joined a group that obviously is terrorist is a terrorist group. So whilst whether or not you agree with it, it's a lot more like there are reasons for why what's happened has happened. But in the future, obviously, what could this be extended to? Like, what other people in the future could potentially lose their citizenship over reasons other than terrorism?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, it's no matter what your feelings are on this case, they've broken, the UK have broken the law. Like, it's a fact. They've broken the law. They're not allowed to do it. You are not allowed to, every person in this world has a right to citizenship. And it's scary because, as I said before, as people of colour, we're already aware of how conditional our citizenship is. So you're really just walking around with an asterisk over your head, like not quite a British citizen, you know? And also, in terms of the Shamima Begum case in general, we can't... It's a very, very techie one, because what she did is her crime isn't victimless. You know, when she went to join a terrorist organization, so what she did is not victimless. However, we can't also divorce the fact that her treatment in the UK by the wider British public and media is also steeped in Islamophobia and racism. You can't deny that, because we have people like Jihadi John, for example, like a white British man who also left to join ISIS. He does not get the same kind of scrutiny and coverage. And again, this is not to say that what she did was right or whatever else, but also now we need to think about and this is a very, very uncomfortable truth, because when we think of something like, for example, ISIS, they are formidably a wrong, like, it's just wrong, right? There's no way to moralize or reconcile with what ISIS is and what ISIS stands for. However, having said that, we need to we need to look at the way that we understand victimhood and the way that we frame like victimhood in this country, because Shamima Begum, and this is an uncomfortable truth that a lot of people don't like to think about, she was groomed. Like, she was 12 years, the facts of the case are, she was 12 years old when she started communications with you know, ISIS members. Her family did flag it up to the authorities. They didn't do anything about it. And then eventually she left to join them. And people are saying like, oh, at 15, you know the difference between right and wrong. And oh, I knew the difference between, you know, right and wrong at 15. Yeah, that's true. But also, who are ISIS? They are an organization that the FBI and the MI5 have been trying for the best part of over a decade to combat. Why would a 15-year-old girl be able to resist, a 15-year-old girl from ENDS, why would she be able to resist a deliberate, a willful system of grooming when the MI5 and the FBI can't even tackle ISIS, and you expect Shamima Begum at 15 to be able to do it, you know? Like, she was groomed, she was radicalized. There's no way, however we want to frame the situation, that is the fact of the matter. She was radicalized and groomed, most importantly, on British soil. And this is another problem. This is another kind of like layer to this argument of, oh, what do we do with her? Bro, she was radicalized on British soil. And this is where, like, I'm going to speak very carefully here because I'm not making any accusations, but I want to follow this line of questioning in earnest. And the line of questioning is, how does a 15-year-old girl board a flight without any adult supervision to Syria in 2015 at the height of ISIS activity and nobody bats an eyelid? How is that allowed to happen?
I mean, literally, when you said that now, I was like, it's literally incredulous.
Yeah,
like,
how is that allowed to happen?
And you know what? It's also like, how have I never thought that before?
Yeah.
It's probably because there is this subtle Islamophobia rooted
course.
in my head as well, that I'm like, oh, she's joined ISIS, like, you know what I mean? That's
what happens. But this is what I mean, like, why was that allowed to happen? She's 15 years old, and again, 2015, the height of ISIS activity. How did this happen? And again, I bring back to the point that I was saying before. She had correspondences with ISIS members since the age of 12. Her family had flagged this up to the authorities, and the British state failed. The British state failed to act. And now all of a sudden, and this is a funny thing as well, like, Bangladesh is just chilling. Bangladesh is not involved in any way. Now all of a sudden she's Bangladesh's problem. Yeah. And also, I want to bring in another point as well while we're talking about this. They're pushing Shamima Begum to Bangladesh for her to deal with, right? Knowing, by the way, that Bangladesh has capital punishment for crimes such as these. Why then did the British state, there are, for those of you who don't know, this is a bit of a history lesson, there are people who committed war crimes during the 1971 Liberation War in Bangladesh who have, they're in hiding now in the UK. The Bangladeshi government had requested for these people to be extradited back to Bangladesh. The British government have refused because they say that, oh, if they go back to Bangladesh, they'll get the death penalty. So again, it's a very willful thing. Like, how come they're so willing to send her to Bangladesh? Bearing in mind, this girl has never stepped foot in Bangladesh in her life. Like, I don't understand. Like, what's Bangladesh got anything to do with this? They're just chilling, brother. And now they have to deal with ISIS bride. It's actually so true. Like, for example, if say, like we were talking before about would this have happened if say a white girl had been radicalized by ISIS and wanted to come back, would we be saying, oh no, she's got to go back to Sweden? You know what I mean? She's got to go back to Norway. You know what I mean? Like, she's not our problem. She's like the We'll send her back to her like Viking roots,
Yeah,
like
literally.
you know, wherever the Anglo-Saxons came
Yeah.
from. We'll send her back there. It's not gonna happen. It can't happen. Like it literally can't. And that's why, again, when we see cases like Jihadi John, for those of you who don't know, like Google him. Why is this person not receiving the same media scrutiny? And also, like, another thing, again, like, we can't divorce the Shamima Begum case from the culture of Islamophobia because, for example, do you guys know what Prevent is?
Prevent.
Yeah, so it's a government scheme. So every Muslim will know right now, like, it's a government scheme that basically looks to tackle radicalization. So they look to find the kind of like early onset radicalization of extremism and terrorism and things like that. But obviously, it's used disproportionately to affect Muslim students. I'm talking about harassment, like infiltration in as young as primary schools. They're literally, these government officials are infiltrating primary schools and trying to get kids to like snitch on their parents and things like that. It's ridiculous. The fact is that there's only a 2% difference in Prevent referrals between white extremism and Islamist radicalization, right? So why does one receive more scrutiny than the other? Why does one receive disproportionate scrutiny from the other? That's what I mean. You can't divorce the culture of Islamophobia and racism from this case.
Mic drop.
To be honest, you know what? I'll just say one last thing, yeah, and this is obviously my personal opinion. A lot of people are celebrating this decision, the Supreme Court's decision to, not give her to strip her of her citizenship. And I understand for a lot of ethnic minorities, it comes from a place of like anxiety, especially Muslim communities, anxiety that if we're not shown to actively side against her, then they're going to assume that we're with her, right? But let me just say one thing to you guys. For me, Priti Patel acts as like a moral compass, right? Whatever her opinion is, I'm on the other side of that. So if you find yourself agreeing with Priti Patel, just ask yourself like, what's going on there? That's just my personal opinion.